Yeah, this is Don Cherry, and this is our very, 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 very first Don Cherry's Grapevine podcast. And I'm sitting here with my son Tim, who's been through the wars with me. He was on the bench when a lot of things happened, and he's from Boston. I'll tell you a funny story. He even talking like a Bostonian. I remember he come down. He says, I said, well, I have to ask him about school when we were in Boston. I said, how's it? He says, yeah, he says, we learned about shocks today. I said, oh, that's good. He's learning about cars and stuff. He says, no, shocks. And then my wife said to him, he's talking about sharks.
Yeah, you quickly picked up the dropping the R's in Boston. Shock, ka, and everything, it's almost like a different language. Pop was called tonic. Yeah. Somebody said, you want a tonic? And I thought, because I thought it was tonic water.
I remember when we went there with Boston and we said, can we have a milkshake? And they shook up a bunch of milk.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, what do they call them? Frappes.
Fraps, milkshakes are fraps. Submarines are hoagies. Cindy worked at the hoagie.
Yeah, my daughter Cindy went hoagies. So what the heck's a hoagie? And submarine, they're all they have a different language down there. Southie Boston. Yeah. And I remember Johnny Caniff. He was from. He was a great guy, and he played for me in Rochester. And after he'd have a couple of beers, you could not understand this guy, and you could not understand him. He was a great guy, and I think I became a coach somewhere down the. He was assistant coach for the Bruins.
Right. Well, I think that everybody wants to know. Last week was kind of a maelstrom, so everybody wants to know kind of your version, a long version of what happened.
Well, he heard Ron's version. I'm not. He's still a friend. I'm still a little disappointed, but I won't go any farther than that. No, what happened was evidently I said something, and everybody knows what I said, and I offered to explain, and I guess not an apology, but I was going to smooth it over, and they made conditions that made it impossible for to do it. I just couldn't do it. And I guess I bit the belt, and that's, you bite the bullet. I don't know what else to say. I said what I said. I still say, and I still say, everybody in Canada should wear a poppy. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Young men died over there for our way of life, and we do our way of life, and we love and the milk and honey. Yes, I use the word milk and honey, because that's what we have. We have the best country in the world. And I still believe everybody should wear a poppy. And evidently that I said something and upset Sportsnet, and they canned me, and I am now unemployed except for doing this beautiful podcast.
Did they, right after that, the whole thing happened, did anybody come and say anything to you?
No, and nobody... No, nobody did, and I just assumed I never got a letter. I never got anything. I just assumed they knew it was over, and there was a few guys in there that they were good guys. But I mean, I guess
no, I'm saying after the coach's corner.
Oh, you mean guys that phone me? Well, I don't want to get them in trouble. But a lot of guys phone me. A lot of hockey players phone me. A lot of general managers phoned me. A lot of people, a lot of guys from the service left the message. Guys were dropping in the door. What really made me feel good, I'd be truckers that would stop, say, Grapes, we're with you, and give me the thumbs up. The firemen went by out the outside, beeped their horn, turned around, beeped their horn again. The service, the way I feel about it, the policemen are with me, the servicemen are with me, my armed forces are with me, and the firemen are with me. They're pretty good guys to be having your corner.
Yeah. And it was nice to see Max.
Max Tommy. I mean, I've known him, and you and him. You went to the game, and I'll tell you a funny story. I give tickets to a mechanic, and he's got a son who is about the same age as you guys, went about 8 years old, and he sat, and Max was playing for the Montreal Canadiens, and he said to his son, Max Tommy sat in that seat that you're sitting in, said he was going to play in the National Hockey, and there he is. So. Max, and it's a funny thing in that coach's corner. I remember my last coach's corner. I did something for two young boys from Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. One was 15, 17, they died. I did something for Max with his book and the stick and with diabetes. And then I did something for the Brampton Battalion. Nothing was mentioned about that. Nothing. Just two little words just seemed to set everybody off. But hey, that's the way life is. I lived in a vicious world, and I lasted 38 years. Happy to be there for 38 years, and if I got to go, I'm glad I'm going out with my shield.
Yeah, that's good. It's a different world out there with the cancel culture, and you know that they had their eyes set on you. They had their guns set on you for, I think, this year for sure. I mean, I think there was a lot of fake outrage, and that's what happened.
Well, I can't say anything. Yeah. On to better glories. One door closes, another door opens up, and I'm really, this is fun for me.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do, talk a little bit about this podcast. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about, almost do like a longer coach's corner, so we won't be 7 minutes, so we won't be rushing. And then also what we're going to do is we're going to take some clips from the Grapevine shows that we did back in the 80s and 90s and kind of look at some of them. And the first one we're going to do this later on in this podcast is, I think, one of the guys that you were most excited about interviewing was Rocket Rashard.
Oh, yeah, the Rocket. I will never forget the time, my one and only game in the National Hockey League. I sit there in the dressing room like a rookie and keep my mouth shut. And I remember Milt Schmidt was the coach, and he says, look, we got to line up and honor, they're going to honor Rocket Rashard and Bernie Jeffrey. And Al Leko who had a fight with him the time before and hit over the head by the Rocket, I guess. And he just went nuts. He throws sticks. I thought, this happened in the National Hockey League all the time. And sure enough, and I'll never forget it, I was standing at the blue line, and he started me, which was pretty good, first game and everything. And they brought in the Rocket, and they brought the house down. He was second in the scoring. And Bernie Jeffrey who I think he got an iron or something. I don't forget what he got, iron or something. So then Bernie Jeffrey they booed him. He won the scoring championship, and he went down because the people really wanted the Rocket to win his one and only chance to win the scoring title, and Bernie beat him. And I never forgot, they booed the Bernie Jeffrey, boom, boom, and they cheered the Rocket. They loved the Rocket. And Ron McLean and I know I'm getting on a tangent here, but I remember Ron McLean and I went to his funeral, and we drove up from Philadelphia. I think it was Pittsburgh and Philly were in the finals, and we drove up, and I never forgot this. The Cardinal, we have a big, beautiful church and everything. We were sitting up there. The Cardinal was said, "I want the Rocket to go out." That kind of getting choked up here, but I never forgot. He said, "I want the Rockets cheering. I want you people to cheer as his coffin goes out." And they were going, "Vive la Rocket, vive la Rocket." It was unbelievable, and I never heard of a guy in a funeral, and they were cheering as he went out. The Rocket was really something. I could tell you more stories about him, but he was. And we had him on, and boy, he was. I thought, I'm going to have trouble with this guy, because he did not. I have to say, he did not. Was not too happy. He come on, but he had a friend with him, and we told him the questions before, and he could see that we weren't out to get him or something. I don't know, but you talked to the chap before in Grapevine.
Yeah, I talked to the guy that was with him. It was a friend of his, and he said the Rocket really enjoyed himself, and he was one of the few times that he did a sat down interview. He says, I don't ever think he ever really sat down and did a long interview, especially in English, right? And
he come in, you could see, and boy, he had a way about him. They walked around. He walked like very straight. And it
was almost like royalty when he walked in.
Like it was a king. He should have been king, and he felt that he was better. He could just see, he knew he was Rocket Rashard.
Yeah.
He was great.
But he was nice. He shook everybody's hand, and he went down and he signed autographs with everybody and stuff like that. But you really did feel there was this.
There's something about him.
Yeah.
He had a royalty about him, and he was a little suspicious, but I think when you got him aside and said, this is the questions we're going to ask. Yeah. Usually in an interview with the Rocket or with anybody, and with me, what they do is, and I've been interviewed 9 billion times, is that they ask good questions. They say, this is the questions. And at the end, when they've got everything, they hit you with a killer. Yeah. And he thought, And he said, I think you explained to him, we're not going to do that. We're here to have a good time.
Yeah. Well, let's hear from the Rocket now. This is on from our Grapevine show. It was around 1984. And he talks about the whole incident with Hal Lako, as you say, and then what happened there, and him getting suspended, and then
he got suspended for the playoffs.
I think, he talks about that, and then he goes into detail about the Rocket Rashard riots in Montreal.
Well, listen, I know that Hal Lako, as an old hockey player, is not one of your favorites when you play.
Don't talk about Hal Lako. Come on.
Just so we're having fun, eh? No, but I was there when the time and when you come back that time, and I remember you were suspended. I remember in the paper you had a great big cut on your head too. Well, just tell us about it, just quickly. You know, I mean, you don't have to.
Well, quickly, Lako hit me over the head, and I turned. The play kept going, and I came back at him, and I tried to swing at him, not with my stick, but when I saw the blood, that's when I saw the blood. Yeah. And I had the linesman, a guy by the name of Thompson. He was holding me from behind.
Yeah, oh, nice.
Three times I had to get rid of him. Yeah. The third time I turned around and I hit the linesman. You know where, right?
Yeah, I know where. Got $2,500, $1,000 peace bond, I think it was. Suspend you for the rest of the season in the playoffs.
Rest of the season, there was only 3 games left. And I think the playoff was a bad suspension. I think I should have been suspended for the following season.
Yeah, that's what they do now. Like they don't go in the playoffs.
That's right.
The riot after you got suspended was really something. Tell us about that.
Well, the riot, I didn't like it. No doubt about that. When I went in the Forum that night, we were playing against Detroit Red Wings, and I went to sit right behind the goalie there, right behind the net. And after 3 minutes, was after the first period. Somebody threw a bomb, and that was right beside Mr. Campbell and his wife at the time. And when we came out, Mr. Campbell came into the medical room there where Bill Head was, and I tried to talk to Mr. Campbell, but I was with the president of the police in Montreal. Oh, yeah. And he grabbed me, he says, never mind, don't talk to him. So,
and then they had a riot after?
The riot I didn't see because I stayed in the medical room.
You had to go on the radio and tell them to stop.
Well, I went
just like the Pope.
Just like I went on the radio the next morning and told the people that I was going to take all the blame and take my punition, and I was asking to stop everything. So everything was quiet after that.
You know, there were so many stories that I've heard about the Rocket, and I mean, they talk about guys holding and everything. Guys used to sit on him, and he was a left winger, and he loved playing the right wing. And he said when he cut to in, he had the whole sort of like Mcdavid does. Like when he cuts to the left, he comes down that right side. He's got the whole net. So anyhow, this guy played for New York. His name was Bob Dill, and he was a tough guy, but the Rocket was tougher. So they had a fight. He knocked him down. And Bob Dill, in front of everybody, he said, so the next time out, they had another fight, and he knocked him down again. And they come out again, and he knocked him down again. And the headlines of the next day was, the Rocket and Bob Dill had a fight, and Dill pickled. I thought that was always the best one. The Rocket was a great guy. He could put him in, and he could throw him too.
Yeah, no, and you could see even at the Grapevine show that those cold black eyes.
Yeah,
right? Like eyes like a shark almost.
Yeah, he like, and I remember the picture. Quaker Oats. We used to have. We used to get some great pictures, boy. And I'll tell you, boy. And he put up with an awful lot of abuse. I remember the time Leo Labine knocked him cold. He was cutting in behind Leo. He used to be like Scott Stevens, come behind the defense and knocked him cold. And they brought him in the dressing room, and he was knocked out. And he went back out, and the blood was streaming down him. There's a great picture of him and Sugar Jim Henry, and they shook hands, and he got the winner. And he doesn't remember one bit about scoring the goal. He was knocked out. I mean, he could go on and on about the Rocket, but he was fantastic. They named it right when they said the Rocket.
Right, for sure. One of the other things that we'll be doing on the podcast is talking about stuff that's happening in the NHL. And the one thing that caught your eye was Pageau from the Ottawa Senators.
Well, when we're having a cup of coffee, I cannot believe that this guy is leading the NHL and plus and minus. And that if people doesn't know what plus and minus is, you've been on more goals for than against. And power play is not included either. And this guy, as we talk, I think he was plus 17, which is fantastic for a last place club. And Connor Brown, you know how I like him. He was plus 7. That is fantastic for a last place club for a guy to lead the league in plus and minus, which is so he's worth his money, boy, and he's a firecracker, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Now, you got to when you're talking plus minus, you got to tell the story of a defenseman that you had in Colorado, Mike Christie. So I'll set it up for it a little bit. Was that it was about halfway through the season. It was a tough season, and you had a goalie, Hardy Astrom.
His only problem with Hardy was pucks. So
Mike Christie always seemed to have a little problem with Hardy, and
a little problem.
One day, Mike came into your office and looked at, and he was
you know what happened was, I had the plus and minus comes from the league,
right?
And it was sitting on my desk, and he was dressed and he was full equipment. But he came in to talk to me about something, and something happened over in the other room. So I said, "Just a minute, Mike. I'll be right back." So while he's there, he just happened to pull us, and he said, "I'm minus 38. How can I be minus 38? Minus 38 of all the years in the league. That Hardy, every time I step on the ice, they score a goal." And he was almost in tears. And here I'm the coach that, don't worry about it, Mike. I understand, Mike. I understand. I'm sorry. I know you're right. And I remember one game, it seemed every time he stepped on the ice, they'd score on Hardy. And I remember one game in Winnipeg. It was so funny. There was a breakaway, and it wasn't a breakaway. It was on the outside, and Mike had put the guy to the outside, and he come down, so he let him shoot way from the outside, and the puck went in. I never forgot Mike. After the goal went in, he went in and he leaned on the boards, and he put his stick down, and he could just see him say, I can't say, what do I have? And I remember that goal. And Mike Christie, he's a tough guy. He's having a little problem right now with his kidney and everything, but he was a great guy. He was born in Texas, by the way. I don't know what he's doing. He must have come to Canada, but he was born in Texas. He was a great guy, but when he saw that minus 38, that was pretty bad. And here I'm hiding. I would have thrown it away. He was almost in tears.
When you were coaching, did you look at stats like that?
When I was coaching the Bruins, I did not look at stats. I did, because a lot of times a guy could be, like Mike. It wasn't his fault, and you could see a guy would be minus. And I've already said plus 17 is great. That is plus, but I never looked at that. I knew when I coached the Bruins whether a guy was playing well or he wasn't playing well. When you get the guys thinking about plus and minuses. And when I played for Rochester, Joe Crozier used to check the plus and minus, and I'll never forget. I was playing with Larry Hillman, who was. We have to talk about Larry Hillman sometimes. 8 teams he was on, but Larry Hillman was playing down there. I think we were on for 4 goals against. And every one, I don't have to say this, every one was his fault. And I was the guy that was benched. So I went to Crozier and I said, "What in the world's going on? We're on for the 4 goals or 5 goals against." And I said, "I get benched and he plays." He says, "That's the way it is, Don." He said, "You're a 4th and 5th defenseman. He's number 1. He plays."
Did you tell us the story one time? I think you said you and Daryl Sly
were
a big plus, and you sit it on the bench. And
I said we were sitting on the bench, and we were plus 5. I mean, we were playing Quebec or something. We were on for every goal, 4, none against. And Daryl said, Don, you see we're plus 5. Geez, Daryl, don't say that, because when you say, I don't believe in that. And so, all right, bing, 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 bing. I think we're minus 1. We were on for 6 straight, and he's hysterical. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. And I never forgot that one. That was a good one.
Right. Well, one of the things I remember one of your good friends, Brian Kilroy, talk about plus minus. What he used to do with the 67s, he said, was he started the plus and minus after every month. He says because he could have a bad month and be minus 8, and
That's
have
a
a
good
good
idea.
month and be +3, and at the end of that good month you're still -5.
That's a good idea. I
So
never
what
thought
he
of-
said, he goes, I would start. He says I would look at the plus minus, and then I would start it at the beginning, because he says if you had a really bad month or even a couple of bad games, it really wouldn't reflect how well you were playing.
Well, I know. I that's a good idea. That's why he won 2,000 games in the winningest junior coach of all time.
Yeah.
And I never thought of that, and I get fired by Boston.
Yeah. Connor McDavid, he had 6 points against Colorado a little while ago, and the question came up: do you think Connor McDavid or anybody is ever going to match Daryl Sittler's 10 points?
No, I don't believe anybody's ever. How was it? 10 points? I forget how
10
much.
points,
10
yeah.
points. I don't think anybody will ever touch that, and I take the full blame for that one.
Yeah, that we were playing Boston.
When I was coaching Boston, Toronto, and we were a good club. I think we'd lost one game out of 11 with 10-1, and after that game we went 13 games, I think, with undefeated, something like that. But we walked into Toronto, which was a third place club. It wasn't really that good a club. And I had a rookie goaltender in there, David Reese, who was pretty good. I think his record was
Yeah, he was 7-4-2.
no, that's not bad.
Which not bad, and but his goals against average was pretty good. He was he was under 3 at that time. He was like 2.8 or 2.9.
No, he was a nervous guy anyhow, and I remember he used to rock in the dressing rooms, and he'd rock. And, in Cheevers, he never paid any attention. And he was a rookie, and he rocked back and forth, right? He'd say to the time factor, and we'd look at him. But he was a good kid. But Cheevers, Gilbert was injured. Gilly Gilbert, who, by the way, we must talk about him, who set a record that never to be has 17 straight games, and we must talk about him sometime.
Yeah.
And Gilly was hurt. I called Gilly was hurt. He didn't like me, by the way. I must talk about. But anyhow, he did not like me. But he was hurt, and it was Cheever's first game back from the WHA. So he hadn't played the NHL and that. So and poor David Reese was in there, and everything Sittler shot went off feet or whatever, and skates, and he did legitimately score the goals. And I knew we were lost. So when I no way I was putting the Cheevers, and I looked down at Cheevers, I sort of was going to weaken a little. I mean, here's a poor rookie out there doing it. So I looked down, and there's Cheevers, and he put a towel over his head. Don't put me in. So I left him in there, and poor David Reese, he paid the price. I don't think he ever played again in the National Hockey League.
Nope.
No, I don't think so. And Cheevers come back the next night. We were playing Detroit. I never forgot it. And he shut out. I think we won 7-0. And Cheevers went on from there. But there was no way I was putting in Cheevers in that game, because everything was going in for Sittler.
Yeah, and the footnote on that game is that somebody at CBC lost that game. There's no video of that full game. There's just the highlights that you see in the news package. So there is a rumor out there in the hockey world that somebody recorded that game. A VHS.
You should give it to Cheevers.
To give it this, I'd give it to Sittler, but I don't know if that's true or not. But somebody said that there's only one VHS copy of that game. Maybe one of the most famous Leaf games of all time, and there's no.
Every time there's 2 games they talk about, too many men on the ice and Sittler. And you know what? The funny thing is, I don't think we lost the game to Leafs after that. No. All I'd have to do is, there was a paper out, and every time we come in, they'd make a big deal of it.
Yeah.
And there was one paper, I never forgot, I think we played Buffalo before. They could hardly wait to get at Toronto to make up for that game. And I remember they had a picture of Harold Ballard giving a tea set or something to Sittler. And boy, they were like, they I don't think we ever lost after that.
No. Well, I mean, the one big game in Toronto that we were playing, we were going for first place, and we were down by 3 goals.
Well, that was when when Punch was sitting in the stands with Buffalo.
Buffalo was ahead of us, right?
Yeah, and they were 1 point ahead.
Buffalo, yeah.
And we were losing. I remember we were losing by 2 goals, and I told everybody. I told the defenseman, Dougie Howard and Matty Hagman. I told everybody, just go and don't worry about a thing. So 5-3, you know. I mean, it's over with about a minute.
Yeah, it was like 3 minutes left or something.
Yeah, something like that. So Punch gets up with his wife, and by the time he gets up and gets over to cross the street or get to, he says, "Gee, that's too bad. You're not in first place." Hey, Punch says, "What are you, nuts?" He says, "No, they won." He says, "No, they couldn't have won. They couldn't have scored 3 goals in a minute and a half or whatever it was." And he says, "I'm sorry, Punch, your team."
Yeah.
And I remember Punch, he couldn't believe it that by the time he got to his car, we'd won the game.
Yeah, I remember Dougie Hallward, Donnie Marcotte, and Matty Hagman scored.
Yeah.
Scored.
And I remember they weren't going to count Marcotte. Something happened to Marcotte.
Yeah.
And we had a good referee then, Wally Harris. He was a good referee.
Yeah.
And he counted it, and that was first place.
Yeah, and then that we went, they never looked back and took first place after that.
Yeah. And that was a big game though. If we lose it, because Buffalo had won the night before, and they were 1 point up, we'd have been battling along. But that was a good game, and it was. I never forgot that because I read in the paper where Punch, by the time he got up and by the time he got to his car, we'd won the game.
So he was in first place when he left the building, and
Yeah.
then by the time he got to his car, he was in second place.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
Well, that was our first podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Don Cherry's Grapevine podcast. We're just sitting in the kitchen having a coffee, and Del, my grandson, is doing all the work on it, and we're having a lot of fun. And I hope you listen again.
Yep. So next week we're going to on the Grapevine guest. We're going to have Terry O'Reilly, and we're going to have him talking about your practices called Black Tuesdays and what they were, and then you're going to talk about his. We'll talk about his battles with Dan Maloney and the warning you gave him that he
I had
didn't
the
heed.
warning, and he did not listen to his coach. And I'll talk about another guy that made kind of a fool of him in Atlanta. Boy, I'll tell you, didn't make fool of the Boston Strong boy. I used to call him fine broth of a lad, Terry O'Reilly.
Great. So that'll be next week on the Don Cherry Grapevine podcast.